Hey, what's up everybody? In this tutorial, I wanted to go over how to bury the weights of bouncing balls without the help of any rigs in Autodesk Maya. I went ahead and saw a lot of great tutorials out there that all use downloadable rigs, but I really want to cover the basics in this lesson, and this is good if you're new to Maya or new to animation in general. Hopefully this helps you out. This is a shout out for my buddy Sean and his amazing students in his class who are just learning how to animate. So hopefully this helps them get going. All right, so what I've done so far is I have a singular ball and kind of a ground plane that's created by a cube. And I'm going to move my scroll wheel back so you can kind of see that. And I'm in side view. So I hit spacebar, navigated to side view, hit spacebar again, and here I am. Before we get started, we want to adjust a few of the preferences. So I'm going to go over to, I love this icon. It's like a little guy getting chased by a gear or a saw blade, kind of crazy. But I'm going to go there and I'm going to hit animation and I'm going to look in my animation elements and I'm going to make a few changes. So first and foremost, I want to make sure everything is set to non-weighted tangents. And then I want to adjust my default in. So I like to use clamped. And then I like to use stepped. Now, we'll get into what these are in a few moments, but essentially, I don't want to see the in-between drawings of my keyframes. I only want to see just the keyframes themselves. I can worry about everything in between a little later. This is the way I learned to animate, and it's a heck of a lot easier when you're getting started as an animator to not have to worry about floating objects or objects that aren't going the direction you want. Just focus on the initial poses. When you get that, you can go ahead and hit save. Another thing I like to do, which you could have done in that menu, is I like to right click on the timeline. I like to go back to playback speed and I choose real time. That's just a quick, again, right click, go back to playback speed and select real time. That's just going to allow you to see things a bit slower in your browser and really allow you to refine the animation where you want. All right. Now that we have that, let's get started. The first step of what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set our initial poses for this bouncing ball. We're going to go ahead and do one bouncing ball to start and then duplicate it, just because when we make something heavy or light, we actually don't need to adjust the keyframes too much in the sense of their placement. Really, we just want to kind of focus on the graph editor, which we're going to dive into. So one little trick is if this handle is too small, hit the plus and minus keys on your keyboard. That will make that handle bigger. So if it's like really tiny and in there, just hit that plus and minus key. You can usually find them by the backspace key on your keyboard. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So at the very first frame, you can start at frame 0 or frame 1. I want to animate in translate Y. Now, there's many ways you can set a keyframe. You can hit S on your keyboard, which I just hit, and you're going to see it keyframes all the elements. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We can actually go to edit and we can go to different delete by types, and we can actually delete the unused keyframes down the road. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to hit Control Z here, and bear with me. I'm going to hit Control Z and undo those. And I'm going to just focus on translate Y. So I'm going to highlight translate Y, right click and hit key selected. It's a little tedious to go back and forth, but if you're a beginner, only keyframe what you need. It will help immensely. The next step is I'm going to go over to around frame 12. And we know we're on frame 12 because we can see it down here. By the way, I'm animating in 24 frames per second. You can animate in that, or you can change that up how you see fit. I'm going to take the handle for Y and I'm going to move it down to a certain point. And I'm going to just try to get it to something that I like. And that's about like 0.941. That's a good value to remember because we're going to use that over and over again. And I'm going to right click again and say select key. Once again, you can hit the S key. Just know you'll have to clean that up a little later as you go. The next steps is we're going to just kind of go down the row here and set some keyframes. We can adjust these later, but now that my ball has fallen, and you can see there's no in-betweens because I turned on those tangents, we don't want it to go all the way back to the top. We want it to have less of a bounce. So when I go to frame 20 and I move my cursor, I want to move this ball now to maybe just a little bit less. And I'm using my grid to kind of guide me where that is. Once again, right click, key selected. The next step that we're going to go to is around frame 28. I'm just kind of moving 6 to 8 keyframes upward. It just makes it a little bit easier. And I'm going to type that same number, 0.941, hit enter, just so I know the ball lands on the same ground plane each time. Key selected. So this is what we have so far. If we play it back, it's just going to be really choppy. So I'm going to hit the play button. Doop, 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 doop. Right? Nothing big. Let's rewind just so you can see that. We're going to go down to maybe frame 34. Now we're lessening the space because the ball is going to start bouncing a little more intensely. So I'm going to move that even less of a bounce down. We're going to right click and add that. We'll go over to maybe frame 40. And we will do that number again, 0.941. Again, you can copy and paste these, or you can kind of write them down. It's up to you as you go. You can also fix these later. So if you're just kind of estimating, there's ways to kind of flatten them out as you go in the timeline. So now the ball is going to be bouncing extremely small. So we're going to make really small shifts. So we're going to go up, and the ball is just going to come up ever so slightly now. We're kind of doing a big leap here. And we're going to set that keyframe. Make sure we're setting the keyframe. That's why it's red. And we're going to go down to maybe frame 48. That's our 0.941. You can use any number here. It just depends. Whatever lines up to the ground plane. Key selected. We'll continue to go down the list here. And let's do maybe frame 50 because the ball is going to stop. Maybe 51. So we'll just have it go up ever so slightly, set a keyframe, and you get the pattern at this point. We're just really kind of going up frame by frame and adjusting as we see fit. There we go, 941, key selected. And then it's really going to start happening here where we're almost every 2 frames. So we'll just kind of pick it up just slightly here. No method here, just kind of eyeballing. We can fix all of this a little later. 58 is that 941 again, 0.941, enter. Just remember to keyframe. You can also set auto key. I'm not a big fan of auto key personally because I always end up making bad decisions. Auto key can be turned on right here. So whatever you move it to, it will just set that keyframe. So if you don't want to go back and forth, you can do that. And let's see, we're going to go up like 1 keyframe here and just make it come off the ground just ever so slightly. Hit key selected. And then we're going to go, I think our last keyframe is maybe 60. And we're going to do one more time at that 0.941. Enter. Make sure we write the keyframe. And then we double check because I always forget to set a keyframe somewhere. So we have up, down, 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 up, down. Perfect. Let's hit play. And we'll rewind so that's easier. Now here, we can change this. So you may want to change this to like, I don't know, we'll do 70 just to add some frames. That will allow you to not have to rewind so much and it will just loop. There we have it. So now we have a nice ball bounce. Mind you, no in-between drawings yet. And that's what the graph editor is going to be for. So go ahead and set your keyframes. We're going to take a pause. And when we come back, we're going to learn how to do the graph editor. All right, everybody, welcome back. The next step is we're going to transform this into some really nice, smooth movement. We're going to go to Windows, and I'm going to look for workspaces, and I'm going to select, let's do the animation workspace, and that's going to give us that perfect kind of look. Now, it did move my element here. I'm going to just hit that right panel, and I'm going to use my scroll wheel to scroll out without changing any keyframes here. You can also use your Maya controls for that. Ideally, I just want to make sure I can see this side by side. And I'm going to just do a double check. Yeah, that's looking really good. So again, I'm using my box up here. You can also arrange it manually if you wish. I can turn the grid off now. I don't necessarily need that grid, so I'm going to cycle that on and off. And now I have my graph editor. The graph editor is essentially showing me those clamped and stepped tangents, and you can see wherever it's flatlined in either direction, that means you're not seeing in-between movement. This is exactly what we want because we want to transform these into curves to help the movement of the object appropriately. So the very first things we're going to do, when we think about kind of the curves and whatnot is I like to grab all of my curves now, and I'm going to add those in-betweens. What do I mean by that? Well, right now, nothing in between keyframe A and B. I want to add all that animation back. So I just marquee with my left tool, highlight the graph editor, and if I look at all these really, intimidating for new users, if you hover over some of these, you can see that our step tangent is on here. I want to change this, and if I hover over it, to plateau tangents. And when I do that, watch what happens. Boom, I get this lovely wave. Now, this wave is not controlled yet, so let's play it back, and now we've added in-betweens. So let's hit play and see what our animation looks like. There we go. Not bad. Needs some work, but not bad at all. So again, I switched from step tangents, which do not have that in between, to the curved element here. If I undo stepped and go back to curved, which will allow me now to move those individual keyframes, those individual handles, which we'll get to in a second, and make some adjustments. Now, another thing I can look at is where the ball hits. Now, the bottom of the curve is going to be the floor. And we can tell that because all these keyframes are in the exact same position, which is just that 0.914. So you can see 0 and 2. That's just that number in this format. The top of the graph editor is a lot of different frames. So I'm on frame 12 essentially here, or my keyframe. The one next to it is the region scale. Check this out. Now you can make that ball a little faster. Ready for this? Whoops. Hitting spacebar too much. I think I'm in After Effects. Hit play. Boom, 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 boom. A little bit faster. And again, all I did was grab a set of keyframes, go to this region scaler, pull out the little bar, and that keeps all of your keyframes pretty consistent as they go. So what I'm looking for here is kind of these peaks and valleys. Now, let's say you kind of realize, the ball isn't high enough. What do? You can grab a keyframe, hold your middle mouse button down, and actually raise it in that direction. So I'm going to raise this a little higher to make that peak or that drop a little bit more steep. So now when I hit play, boom, 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 it just has a little more life and a little more look to it. And again, at any point, I can use these focus tools to focus in on my curves. So if you have a specific curve and you want to hyper focus on it, you can use those and it will kind of drop everything and move into the particular part of the curve that you want. Again, that region tool is really helpful because you can raise things and it will keep the uniformity of the keyframe. So I'm just using that and pulling it up. So now that bounce will be a little higher. So again, I mentioned before, you can edit these as you see fit. And this is the great example of that. All right. The next step is we want to adjust a bit to make it feel light. And that happens, what I like to say, on the hills. So we're going to play with these hills a little bit now. And to do that, when we select a keyframe, we get these Bezier tangents. And by default, if I hold my middle mouse scroll wheel down, they're not going to do much. That's because I have to break the tangents. So if I go in and I say break tangent, I'm now going to get the ability to access these separately, which is part of the way I want to do this. The next step is I want to make sure these are unweighted. So you can see that these handles really are kind of affecting the hill, so to speak. And there's a couple things you want to do at this point. The first thing is I want to detach all the handles from one another. So I'm going to highlight all the keyframes and I'm going to choose this break tangents, which essentially let me just grab one side or the next. That's going to help me manipulate the curves the way I want to see it. The second step is I like to, again, grab all the curves and we're going to go ahead and free the tangent weight. And we're going to go ahead and grab all the curves and we're going to go to curves, weighted tangents, and then we're going to make sure that we don't unify them. We free the tangent length. So this button right here. And what that will allow is us to stretch these out. Now here's where the magic comes in. Check this out. I'm going to use my middle mouse button and stretch this to look more like a big hill rather than a big drop off. And I'm going to go to each one, and I don't want to kind of make the hill look like it has a crooked point, but I'm holding my shift button and my middle mouse button. And I'm going to do the same to all of these, just kind of make them kind of essentially just kind of round hills of sorts. And I'm going to go down here to the bottom, hold shift or hold my middle mouse button, and I'm going to just make these again kind of like lumps. And I'm really pushing. I don't want to go here because that's an awkward looking shape. Animation is really about curves and arcs. I'm going to use these curves and arcs. This is telling me I could move this keyframe up. Remember, that's just moving the height in here. And let's look at what we have. We'll go ahead and hit play. Boom, 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 boom. Now we're getting that life. And so I'm going to go through and just kind of adjust these as I see fit. You know, I may move them up slightly just to get a little bit more weight to them. I may go through and I'm holding the scroll wheel, which is going to be kind of an awkward feeling to use your scroll wheel as a mouse, but I promise you, you'll get used to it really quickly. And we have that, and then we have that final little jump there. And I'm going to pull out this first handle, and I'm going to make this kind of a large, almost like a roller coaster hill. Just grab that handle. And again, another part of a hill. Now let's watch the timing. Ready? Let's go. So we'll hit play. And you have a lovely bouncing ball. Okay, so what can we do with this? Now that we have a lighter ball, so to speak, and again, the higher these are, the wider this is. And if you ever want to move these, you know, you can lock them back up here with some of your settings. But, you know, the more air that's in your bounce, the lighter the ball will appear. And once again, this is just tweaking, trial and error. You can kind of see how I am pulling with my middle mouse button here some of these curves to get that appearance. Let's go back to the beginning, hit play. Boom, 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 boom. There we go. You got to make sounds, otherwise you're not animating. So let's take this ball and let's duplicate it. And when we duplicate it, you're going to notice that, you know, we have all of the keyframes set, but they didn't come over with the other ball. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to hit Control Z a few times, and we're going to look for Duplicate Special. I'm going to check this box, and in Duplicate Special, we're going to want to duplicate the input graph. This is an important checkbox because when you do that, now you'll have two spheres with the animation and the keyframes. I'm going to drag this over. And this is the good part about not keyframing everything but the Y. Now we just essentially have two balls bouncing at the same time. But here's the fun part. Now we get to transform the graph editor. So here we can start taking these elements and adjusting their timing and spacing. So I can grab all the keyframes, for instance, and a heavier ball is going to hit the ground essentially at the same time, but it's going to have a more drastic drop off. So I may pull that curve out a little bit more, make it more of a ledge. I may decide to, you know, change the timing a little bit and pull that up. Notice that drastic drop off now. So let's watch that real quick. Boom. It kind of held for a little bit in the air, didn't it? The other thing I can do is once it hits that first reaction, remember, these are the same height, so they're going to hit at the same time. I can go ahead and take that, and I can use my region tool here, and I can pull this in, and I can make some really drastic dropping points. So if I start playing with those curves again, like you see here, now, boom, boom, boom. It's a lot heavier because there's tighter curves. The ball is not going to bounce as high as you see it in the actual element. So just some kind of food for thought on that. We can go in and we can still adjust these to our liking. We have plenty of options. I like to sometimes go through and just hit them with more of a peak, because kind of thinking of that as a big roller coaster rather than a large hill. And we'll go and frame our keyframes a little bit better. So going through and using my different splines to peak them, as you can see, there we go. That one looks really good. And let's play it back and see one more time. Much heavier of a ball in the end. So these are going to really help you do that. These are going to give you a really good starting point to that final look. So now that we have kind of the heavy ball look, we can even take two graphs and start comparing them. So I'm going to take those first a kind of dropping ball look, and I'm going to raise them a little bit more. And we're going to have kind of a more dramatic first fall. So I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to raise those keyframes. And we're going to kind of adjust our viewpoint here so we can see. And let's frame them back so we can kind of get a good look to them. And now the lighter ball, again, maybe we want more of a curve to it. Just kind of tweak these to our liking. Just give them a little more differences. Here's that big drop-off point. Again, with big drop-offs, I like to kind of drag almost it like to be a vertical. I don't want to go too far. See, if I go too far, it starts dancing. I want to just have this kind of almost dramatic drop. And let's look at these from boom. There you have it. So again, being able to kind of tweak these different curves and adjust, and after the initial bounce, that's when we can get a little bit more intense bounces. You can grab individual ones holding shift. We can change the overall timing if we wish. So we have the ability. And as we move these, if you want to go ahead, you can actually uncheck this snap, and this can allow you to kind of have a little more free roam to them. You can go and adjust. If it's slightly off, that will do it. Anything with a magnet essentially means snapping, and that's something to kind of keep in mind. We can grab them all at the same time. We can change them to linear. We can go and adjust them. Again, if we want to lock the tangents again, we can go ahead and lock those. That just means, again, I can't stretch them, but I can still move the individual sides, or I can go ahead and unify the tangents, which essentially means I can pull them out at the same time. Just using these buttons as you go is a really good tip. And if you run into an issue, another good thing with Maya is Maya's going to crash from time to time. You can always just kind of restart. Make sure you save and then restart it. And sometimes some of these tools are going to work for you. At this point, let's see if I can get upwards here. We now have two very unique bouncing balls with timing and spacing. And we've done that through really an efficient way of animation using the graph editor and some other elements. So I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. Again, this is for absolute beginners. And if you're looking to kind of get started in Maya and start figuring out what these buttons do in the pipeline, now you know. You can always move up to those fancy rigs. I think those are fantastic. But this, again, if you're just getting started, gives you an idea of what some of these buttons do. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Be sure to subscribe and like the video, and I will catch you in the next one.